Namaste, Sandeep ji.
Namaste, Sai.
As someone who has been a keen follower of your work, I just wanted to gather your thoughts on a few things. One, where do you see the Hindu civilization heading in the next 10 or 15 years? What would be your, let's say, soothsaying of our destiny, so to speak?
Those are some very open-ended kind of questions you've asked. A, I'm not a soothsayer. B, okay, partially you use the word destiny. Perhaps there is some truth to that. But we are actually living in an age of churn, so to speak, from a civilizational perspective, because that is the premise of your question. In the sense that on the one side you have what you call a huge awakening.
Right.
The last time one such awakening happened was in the 1990s, during the run-up to the Ram Janmabhoomi movement and all the way up to the demolition of the disputed structure.
Right.
So after that, that momentum was not maintained. So the political victory of the BJP, if you look at that as one manifestation of this reawakening, that was just one face of it. But the Hindu civilization and society as a whole could not sustain that reawakening in the way and in the manner that it should have been sustained. So this time around, after 2014 specifically, and up to the time that we're talking, this manifestation has occurred, and there appears to be some signs of awakening of a different sort. So for the first time, I say this for a reason, in the decade of 2004 and 2014, that reawakening that had happened, it kind of tapered off for various reasons, and obvious reasons rather. One thing was a political stranglehold, and the vestiges of the 70-year-old Nehruvian socialist secularist state, they were still strong. And they bounced back with a fury that was unprecedented. So there is some merit in the argument, and I say this strictly within the very limited purview of my studies. For the longest date, while the secularist Congress state, Nehruvian state, whatever you want to call it, while that actively did discriminate against Hindus, there were some lines that it did not cross. For example, the Chanakya serial, or for example, the Ramayana serial.
Mahabharata.
Right. So a lot of Congress ministers, they told Mr. Chandra Prakash Dwivedi, it's on record, they told him that, "Aap fikr mat kijiye. No matter which big boss in Doordarshan will object, nobody can prevent the airing of this serial." So there were some lines that state did not cross. But all the bets were off between 2004 and 2014, where you had the entire machinery of the state not only actively discriminating against Hindus as a community, against Sanatana as a civilization, but actively working to destroy it through legislations, through hostile takeovers, through this NGO regime. But that has gone, more or less. Those forces have been largely been put in their place, so to speak. So this awakening this time has been more or less stable, and there are signs that it is sustaining to an extent. But then the kind of hollowing out that has been done at all levels, that is going to take a long time to fix. So this is one thing, and I say it is in a huge state of churn, because Hindus as a society are trying to grasp at various straws, because the damage has been so multi-pronged, so comprehensive, that you don't know. You have a big building which has been completely damaged, infiltrated, whatever, subverted. New owners come in, and then you don't know what happens. If you switch on something, some light switch or something in the ground floor, the third floor might explode. Some room in the third floor might explode. So this is what has happened. so far. So this is a huge state of churn that we are living in. It is also a huge opportunity because the forces that were inimical to the Hindu civilization, they have been pretty much marginalized, although given their prolonged power and the kind of global networks they have acquired, they still pose a formidable threat.
To what do you attribute the vengeance of 2004 to 2014? Is it just staying out of power, or has it got to do anything with a certain specific set of individuals?
Okay, one line answer to this question would be to quote Mr. Vajpayee, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. He was once asked, what happens if Congress loses power? He said that, a Congress in power might be dangerous, but a Congress out of power is fatal. So this is exactly what is happening. The Congress is never used to losing power. And the day when you look at that, each time Congress has lost, there have been riots. The incumbent government, the government that succeeds, the party which succeeds the non-Congress, government, has inevitably been paralyzed by the same ecosystem, by the same infrastructure that these guys have put in place. This is not even from 1947. This phenomenon dates back much earlier.
So one thing is for them to do everything at their disposal to paralyze the government's functioning. But for it to translate to a greater degree and sharper degree of animus towards Hindus from 4 to 14, what would you attribute that to?
The NAC regime and the Super Prime Minister.
Understood. Okay. As far as, let's say, coming to a much more specific and hopefully a less open-ended question, what would your take be on the suggestions put forth by the NEP 2020 with respect to history curricula? What is your take on that?
Frankly, I have not read the NEP in full.
Okay.
So it won't be nice for me to comment on that. But as far as rewriting specifically history textbooks,
right,
is that your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm assuming the intent is good, it is noble, and it is on the right path. But merely rewriting history textbooks, and I'm all for rewriting them, it is at best a very, very temporary measure. The solution is elsewhere.
Which would be?
Yeah. So if you rewrite textbooks and let's say, they are in circulation, the next generation, next batch of students are, they learn from that. What is a guarantee that, look, political power is ephemeral, especially in a democracy like we have had so far,
right,
and we continue to have.
Right.
It will take just 6 months to undo the whole thing.
Right.
Experience, this better than me, right? So that is a very, very temporary kind of a solution. What I would say, actually, with all honesty, with a deep sense of commitment to this, the roots, ethos of this civilization, what I would say is that dismantle this whole government interference in writing history textbooks.
Agreed.
This does not pose a problem in physics.
Right.
There's no way you can falsify gravity or something, or give a Marxist version of fluid dynamics or something.
Right.
You can't do that.
Right.
So why do you do this? The fact that they've been allowed to get away with so much and for so long shows that the problem is elsewhere. So get the government out of this business of writing history textbooks and let the real scholars fight it out and come to a consensus. So the scholarly community has to decide, what lessons will go into history. Don't color it with an ideology. Like I said, there's no socialist version of thermodynamics or anything.
Right.
So you can't have a Marxist version of Indian history and still pretend that it is somehow history.
Right.
It doesn't work like that.
Right. Now, is there an alternative, or let's say, is there an example to this particular effect in any other jurisdiction in the world where this has happened? And if so, what would the body look like?
I am not sure. I have not made any such kind of a study, but the kind of history. Okay, let's put this approach this in a different way. Now, for example, now I don't know what they're teaching in US. I think US history curriculum is undergoing the same thing that
Correct.
our curricula underwent, say, 60 years back.
Right.
Right. So basically, disown the heroes of the past. Paint them in dark colors.
Right.
So that's what they're doing, and they are bringing out statues of Thomas Jefferson and
Right.
other people, the so-called founding fathers.
Right.
So that is happening there. So this is what the left does each time it gets institutional power. So that apart, for the longest time, the history textbooks of every country taught its children to love the country first. You are writing the history of your own country. You are not born in a vacuum. You are born in a certain space, in a culture, in a civilization, in a society that has a specific cultural inheritance, a long-standing culture. There are ways in which you speak, sit, eat, dress, right, sit, stand. These were all, no book can teach this. For the longest time, it was considered impolite and ill-mannered to sit before elders with your legs crossed. Nobody can teach you. There's no logical answer to this. But you follow it.
Right.
As simple as that.
Right.
So there are some things you can't question, you shouldn't. It's called obedience to the unenforceable.
Right.
All right.
Right.
So these were all some of the premises, and yeah, like I said, you're not born in a vacuum.
Right.
From that angle, if you look at it, what is known as oral history, for example, this is passed on through that.
Right.
Now, on the one hand, you dismiss all this oral history as bunkum because
Right.
nobody gave you a legal,
Right.
evidence to prove that, yes. So so love for one's culture and country, a healthy respect for its heroes and people, stalwart sages, all those things. So these were all embedded in pretty much the history textbooks of all cultures, including India, until the Marxists came in. Some of these were not codified as lessons,
Right.
but they were there.
Right.
People understood. And from a very, very early age, it used to be put in their heads.
Right. As someone who's read R.C. Majumdar, Acharya R.C. Majumdar as you call him, so extensively, and having cited him extensively on the development of the Khilafat movement, as also the riots which started from 1905, 1906, starting with the pamphlet, the publishing of the red pamphlet, the Lal Ishtihar.
Lal Ishtihar.
Are we seeing a repeat of history at this point? Would you say
Oh,
so?
absolutely. Okay, good question. In fact, these Lal Ishtihars have been in circulation even before the partition of Bengal.
Right.
And that happened, these Lal Ishtihars came into existence roughly after the time that Muslims lost political power in India. If as long as a Tipu Sultan, as long as an Aurangzeb, as long as some of these godforsaken Nizams and Nawabs had political control, there was no need for a Lal Ishtihar. The moment that political power was taken away from them, remember, they think first in terms of the community, which is, fed in through their scripture and reinforced, reiterated through their what is known as prayers, day in and day out. So political power maintains all this, so you won't have need for these Lal Ishtihars. So you have to trace such pamphlets back to those days. Then I wrote a longest 3-part piece on the Kohat genocide.
I read that.
Right, so that was also preceded by something like a Lal Ishtihar.
Correct.
So
around Janmashtami.
Yes, and so this keeps happening wherever they attain a critical mass,
Right.
or even close to a critical mass. You will see all these poster walls painted with some indecipherable language.
Right.
Basically, a call to action against Kafirs.
Did the Hindu society have a response mechanism to this street veto prior to independence? If no, why not? If yes, what have we lost?
Okay, we did have a street veto, and even in the case of Kohat, okay, that's a great question. Even in the case of Kohat, Hindus were only 6%.
7%.
6 or 7%.
Yeah, 93 versus 7.
Yeah.
Lala Lajpat Rai said as much. Correct.
7%.
Right.
So you have an overwhelming odds,
Correct.
93% against a determined majority who give a damn about laws and things like that.
Correct.
We see all that.
Right.
Still, they had formed a Hindu Sangathan thing to fight
Sanatan
it out.
Sabha.
Sanatan Sabha to fight it out, and they did give a brave fight.
Correct.
So this was not street veto. It was a complete conscious unity within the Hindu community. That,
in NWFP.
Yeah. That, no matter what, we are Hindus.
Right.
We might be 7%, but we are united.
Right.
So if you put out, a third-rated pamphlet abusing Durga, we will put out a similar pamphlet, caricaturing your gods or your favorite beliefs.
Right.
So this was a response mechanism, and it's a heroic fight. Even in Lal Ishtihar, right, the aftermath, Hindus also hit back in some small pockets.
Right.
And we have the story of who's that guy in 1946 in Calcutta
With rifles.
with rifles and all that.
He
Right?
fought
He is a hero.
against the Sufis.
Yeah, he's a hero.
Right.
So that is because the response to street mechanism came because Hindus cutting across all castes and different beliefs. They were Hindus, they identified as such, and they stood by each other.
Right.
So this was hollowed out, slowly due to secularism, and especially after Hindus became economically mobile
Right.
and affluent,
Right.
post-liberalization.
Right.
So these are things which should have gone hand in hand. Unfortunately, it didn't. So the moment you become comfortable, you're
Right.
like, okay, you'll start hedging your bets.
Right. Is this a particularly Hindu tendency?
Perhaps it is.
Why?
There's no answer to that. The answer is that we have to look within ourselves.
Right. Right. So, should Hindus operate from a sense of civilizational paranoia, or should they be more optimistic about the future?
At the moment, being paranoid is highly advisable. So this whole thing about 80%, India is 80% Hindus is nonsense.
Correct.
It's not 80%.
Right.
That number went down the thing, reduced long ago.
Right.
So let's not fool ourselves.
Right.
So paranoia at the least helps us, survive another decade or two.
Okay. Okay. What would you explain the comfortable relationship between the left in Bharat and the Islamofascists?
Okay, so as far as Islamofascists, rather Islamists are concerned, they are extremely clear in their goal. Wherever you find them in the world, there are 52 countries, I think, all of them are Islamic republics. So they are extremely clear whether it is a complete, 100% or Muslim major, a country which declares itself as ruled by the laws of Islam, be it there, be it in other countries where they have significant majority, wherever it is, they are very clear about their goals. That, the whole world is dark. And we have to bring light to the areas which are not yet illuminated.
By shining the light of Islam.
Correct.
Islam ki roshni.
Absolutely.
Right.
So that, on that point, they're all clear. Right from the birth, they're very clear. It is the communists who have taken a lot of lessons from their books, who delude themselves that by aligning with these people against a common goal, which in the case of India is Hindus, that they will somehow, acquire state power and then we'll deal with the Islamists. That has never worked. Look at the case of Iran.
Right.
So that Shah of Iran, he was perceived to
Stooge of
have
the US.
committed, stooge of US and all that bikini culture he brought in.
Right.
All that's all familiar. So Khomeini and the hardliners, those who are known as hardliners, they're not hardliners, they're extremely clear.
Right.
So they use the communists in Iran, communists who were also Muslims, but who had become atheists and turned towards communism. So they used them to the hilt, and the moment Shah's regime fell,
They were wiped out.
what happened? They were wiped out.
Right.
Same thing happened with is happening in Kerala. Same thing. The fall of the left in Bengal. You side with those people. There's a reason why for this massive influx of illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. The left cadre, as long as these guys were in power, they were given quotas.
Ration cards and
Ration cards to X number of people each month.
Right.
You have to get them ration cards. So you get a permanent captive vote bank which keeps growing because you keep importing all these illegals.
So does it mean that
And
the
then
left,
the monster will eat you.
So are you saying that the left was myopic enough to not draw lessons from other parts of the world and hope that they would be loyal to them? Is that what you're saying?
Left especially in India.
Okay. Okay.
It's left especially in India. The original home, look, the so-called Great Russian Revolution, it occurred, it succeeded despite Marx's prediction that, as the society progressively industrializes and reaches a peak stage of prosperity, industrial prosperity, the workers will automatically revolt and then bring in a communist paradise. But what happened in the case of Russian Revolution? It was a peasants, it was an agrarian country. Where were these industries on that scale in Russia in 1917?
They led the Industrial Revolution of Russia.
Right? Right?
Right.
So that, China, same thing,
Right.
largely a peasant country. So
Right.
these are the only two countries in which this has succeeded, and of course Cuba, but that's a godforsaken thing. I don't think we need to even waste our time on that. So these are the two countries where the so-called original communist revolution has succeeded. On the other hand, the Indian communists from the day, they were content to, become HMV, his master's voice. The stooges, they were content for being stooges of, whatever Lenin or Stalin said. And the faithful reproductions of the line would be given there, the methods would be decided in Russia, their agents would come and, give the message to M.N. Roy and all those jokers, and then the street action would happen.
Right.
So where is the originality? These are toughers actually, Indian communists, from day one. So they had all these illusions that somehow will align with Islamists. What they identified as the biggest enemy was the Hindu culture, the society, its long-standing traditions, and its civilizational inheritance. So in the realm of what is incorrectly known as soft power, in those realms, cinema, art, culture, music, dance, painting, right? In those realms, you give me a list of 5 major items that they have consistently attacked. And it becomes very clear from their targets, and these are sustained targets, that those are the precise elements that are still holding the Hindu civilization together.
Right. As someone who knows for a fact that your portal Dharma Dispatch is widely read, what's been your experience of writing that portal? And what kind of feedback have you received? And 3, does the readership and its feedback give you hope that this civilization still has positive days ahead?
Okay, which should I answer first?
Whatever you choose. Whatever you choose.
Yeah, one thing based on the reader feedback, it does give me a lot of hope. The support that I have received from Hindus across the world, Hindu community across the world, has been nothing short of phenomenal, actually. There's some messages and emails I get which are deeply moving.
Congratulations.
Yeah, they're extremely moving actually. Some of them have come home actually, and they've expressed their appreciation or gratitude for the work we do and things like that. So there is a lot of hope. The only thing perhaps that is preventing a concrete sort of an action or a mass unity is a fear. Deep-seated fear. That fear operates at multiple levels, including being betrayed by your own people.
Right.
And a lack of, let's say, you can't say government support, a lack of a proper support system, an organized support system, which will definitely stand by them in times of trouble. And a preventive safeguard. So this preventive safeguard is happening on the ground where the Islamic threat has reached alarming levels in coastal Karnataka.
Right.
So people have to walk around with arms, Hindus there, which they're doing.
Okay.
This is a reality no TV channel will tell you.
Right.
So anyway, so all these things, and they've been giving me feedback as well.
Okay.
This does give me hope, but what prevents all these things, a concrete, actionable kind of environment where Hindus naturally feel safe is some of these points. Others I can't tell on camera.
Right.
And something else, there's on the tip of my tongue, but I just forgot. It'll come to me.
That's
so,
okay.
Yeah.
So, do you have, let's say, a vision for mentoring more people in your mold in terms of your approach to culture and civilization? If so, what is your plan of action for mentorship?
No, I don't think anybody will be interested to be mentored in this area.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
That is the reality. I'm not saying it out of arrogance or anything, but that is just the reality.
I see.
And to do work of this sort, it requires a certain level of training, which you have to either formally undergo or learn yourself.
Okay.
Apply your mind and do that.
Okay.
This atmosphere was there earlier. It died out over the years. So there is a reason that the stalwarts like Sitaram Goel, the extraordinary resistance, intellectual resistance that came to the leftist discourse, the stranglehold, it came from outside the institutional framework.
Right.
Sitaram Goel was not affiliated to any college or university,
Right.
nor was Ram Swaroop.
Right.
Conrad Hill's career was destroyed because he stood by Hindus.
Right. Right.
So I can give you several such examples, but the body of work, their legacy, and the reawakening that they were instrumental in, that is very inspirational. If it had had institutional backing or at least a broad-based support system, things would have been different. What our families and ancestors used to do at home, these people have to do it on books and
Right.
speeches.
I hope you don't mind this final question. My personal sense of reading your work is, apart from the brilliant insights that I get, is that there is a deep sense of anger that pervades your writing. Anger not in a negative sense. Perhaps the better substitute would be Raudram in some ways. And maybe there is also an element of bitterness at the manner in which the Hindu society has treated its own stalwarts and its own voices. Would this be an accurate reading of your work?
Not really.
Okay.
There's no anger. There is a call to action.
Okay.
See, because if your writing or your work is imbued with anger, that itself becomes a big obstacle for clarity of thought and expression and
Right.
articulation.
Right.
So there's no anger. There's a sense of, to put it broadly, a sense of contrast and comparison that, look, this is what it was, this was how it was, and look what has happened. So if there is an element of, there are different ways to put across your message so that it appeals.
Right.
One is to provoke. Two is to convince through a friendly manner, in which the Christian padres are very good at doing this.
Right. Right.
That is another way.
Right.
Through gentle persuasion. Then the other thing is doing this comparison, and when you write it with a certain sense of force, I think it appeals.
Okay.
So, yeah, if that answers your question.
It
I mean,
does.
this is nothing compared to what Sitaram Goel writes. So he writes about Muhammad Habib. I'm taking a random example because it is very, very mild compared to what is written about other things. He says, Muhammad Habib made me, I'm just paraphrasing, he made me wait for half an hour at his house, and once he gave me an audience, his tone was so arrogant and haughty that it exceeded his syphilitic face. So just small. His attitude was worse than his syphilitic face or something.
I see.
Yeah. So
Wonderful.
you don't see that in my writing. Not that I'm comparing myself. So just to make a point about the anger.
Understood.
So, yeah.
Understood. Thank you so much, Sandeep ji.
Yeah.
I've always learned a lot from you, and I hope to continue learning from you.
Thank you. You're also
Thank you
doing
very much.
great work.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.